Hey, Linnea, like your hair. Looks good.
Oh, thank you. I got a haircut. I got rid of my whole mullet situation I had going on.
Who else we got here? Laura Sobolewski, Jessica, Julie, Brian. Not sure who this is. Oh, Emily. Emily's here tonight. Nice.
Hello.
All right. I'm very yellowy and my face is shadowed. If I do that, then you can see me better. Oh, let's see if I can do this. There, that helps some. Chat.
There we go. Laura, I was looking at your avatar on the beach. That was pretty cool.
I was trying to prepare for my trip to the Keys in a couple of weeks.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
I'm so looking forward to it.
Are you going all the way down at the bottom to Key West?
We're staying in Marathon, but we'll be going to Key West for a day or two.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
I'm jealous. I'll have to tell my husband, see if I can inspire him to make a trip down there.
I highly recommend it.
Hey, we used to go down there before kids. We would go down there twice a year.
Nice. Nice.
So, yeah. That was when, double income, no children, and no responsibility. So that was easy.
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah. All right.
So Angela, did you send the shirt to Bree?
I did.
Okay. That was pretty funny.
Yeah. I had to after her post.
Yes, so
I felt compelled.
compelled, that's a good word.
Yes.
Compelled as opposed to obligated.
Correct.
Nelson.
Yes.
Hi. Since we haven't started yet, can I ask a question?
Absolutely not. No. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so this is so weird. Right before class, I've been doing my Aikido practice with my Zoom, and we were just finishing up class, and there was a lot of motion, a lot of movement in my living room. And so when I came to do sit seiza and do the closing part, Tomodachi comes over to me and starts licking my ear a ton and ton. And I was like, I thought, well, okay, I tried to move her, but that didn't work. So I stayed really still to see if she would stop. And she calmed down by me staying still. But she was like so excited. She was humping at the same time. And I'm like, what is that about? She's humping and licking my ear. And I'm sitting still. And then I thought, I got to ask you. And then I looked at what this is about today. And he says about piloerection. I'm thinking, okay, maybe that's perfect timing for what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, there's an aspect of piloerection that is involved in anticipatory or sexual behaviors as well. So, and it's not necessarily that, that's a precursor to that, but it's a state of mind, basically. And it may have been your state of mind, your relaxation, calmness, whatever else that triggered that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't it didn't feel negative. It didn't feel like she was trying to take over,
No,
but she was
it's
excited. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. It was just like in front of the camera, so it's kind of weird.
it's kind of like that guy, I guess it was on a local TV show, morning show or something like that. That guy was supposed to interview somebody, and a dog came on and was just staring through the lens of the camera. The guy just started breaking out laughing. He couldn't contain himself. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and get started because I've got, these are my notes. There's a lot of them, guys. I'm going to get as far as I can, and hopefully some of it makes sense to you. Okay. And I've got, essentially I've got three parts. First of all, what is piloerection? And then secondly, how is it used? And thirdly, what does it mean? And then there's sort of a subsection of that, of how can we use that? Don't know if I can even get to that, but at least some of these explanations should help. So we'll go ahead and start. I'm just going to look at my notes because I have so many of them, so pardon me. So first part, what is piloerection? Essentially, the definition of that is the erection or bristling of hairs or hair follicles, essentially, due to the involuntary contraction of small muscles at the base of the hair follicles. This occurs as a reflexive response to sympathetic nervous system, which is SNS, especially to cold, shock, fright, but other emotions as well. There's also some parasympathetic aspects to it, certainly in humans, but we suspect in dogs as well because of the similarities of neurotransmitters and meaning behind it all. Basically, all mammalians to some extent have piloerection. So I'm going to share screen. I have one illustration so that you know what we're talking about. And that is this. So if you look, I'm going to simply increase the size of that. Okay. And what you see is the hair shaft itself, the base of it, and the nerve fibers here. Okay. So what we're talking about as far as the layers, epidermis, the dermis, subcutis, and the veins below that, and these are your sweat glands. This is on a human, obviously, but dogs are very similar. They don't have sweat glands in those areas. But what we're talking about is the erector pili, which is this muscle right here, that actually there's multiples of these between and along a line to the base of the hair shaft itself, or the fur. So that's what we're talking about, is this aspect. And when humans have the same thing. In human skins, we would call it goosebumps or the shivers or stuff like that. Okay. You feel the hair on the back of your neck go up when you have uncertainty, fear, uncertainty, doubt, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the areas. Obviously, there are other exciters that involve epinephrine and norepinephrine, which is adrenaline and similar neurotransmitters and hormones. And those cause those activities in us for various reasons, which we'll get to. So the base of the word comes from the Latin word for hair, which is pilus or pilus, P-I-L-E-S. That's where that comes from. So basically pilus, O, and then erection. So piloerection. So in other words, hair lifting or hair standing on them. Okay, so that's where it comes from. First known use of the word piloerection was in 1930. But,
Oh boy.
but it was understood as early as the 19th century, and it was noted by Darwin in his study of different animals, species. So it probably goes back, the understanding of it, thousands of years. You just don't know about it in literature or written word. So now birds' use is different, and it's not created by the same autonomic erector pili muscles. They have what's euphemistically called feather muscles, which are different than what mammals have, which is this illustration here. And they have nothing to do with the epinephrine or norepinephrine type of stimulus. Okay. I hope that now you have to look at me the rest of the time. So that is piloerection in a scientific definition, essentially. I'll get into a little bit more of that. I have an article I will quote from as we go along. It's physiological study of emotional piloerection, and it's based upon human emotional responses, but it also goes a bit into animals as well. So it's psychophysiology is what they're studying. So how is it used? Okay, so here we go. We're going to jump down into this. So first of all, as the autonomic nervous system, which we call ANS, there's the adrenaline component involved in almost all piloerection in mammals. The first area of it is actually thermal regulation, and it's used in animals with fur to cool off by releasing trapped air at the body, so they can raise it to cool off in certain conditions, but it also traps more air for heat. So they can use it for thermal regulation in both ways. So when a dog, for instance, is cold, especially for instance, I'll use Siberian Huskies as an example. When it's 70 degrees below zero and they have thick layers of fur, they have the undercoat and then the guard fur, they raise those up, and the undercoat layers trap more air rather than here, and that air is an insulator to them. So it helps regulate the temperature of the body. There's also an aspect of that's involved in piloerection that it thermoregulates dissipating heat created by, in other words, the causal action is from the intent or stress of that dog. So it actually causes those muscle fibers to erect the fur, and that heat then is dissipated off into more area. And once again, it's an insulator value, but the heat is both causational as well as because of epinephrine and norepinephrine. I'll use the non-technical words, adrenaline. Because of that, what it's doing is it's preparing the body for action, essentially. So it's a protective device in that way.
No.
Whoop, make sure you're muted, please. everybody? Thank you. So that's one component of it. The SNS, or sympathetic nervous system, is the emotional responses involved. Okay, and we'll go over this a few times so that you get some idea of it. So in sympathetic nervous system, you have with the adrenaline aspect and emotional response, those major categories are surprise, so something unusual, fear, aggression, uncertainty, and anticipatory aspects. So in other words, could be a potential of good or bad. And that those are two different categories, but it's anticipatory of some future thing. The parasympathetic, I'm getting ahead of myself, is actually a calming type of aspect. And that deals with the norepinephrine, but calming, it occurs in us. And I've obviously, as a itinerant musician for the past 60 something years, I've studied music with humans as well as with dogs, the psychological aspects involved in that. And I've seen the calming aspect of that in their and certain types of instruments, whether it's live instruments or whether it's recorded or whatever else, and the effects of that on the dogs. But it is a calming effect for most all of them, and depends on the music type as well as the instrument type. As I've said in some classes that you guys have been in, playing a piano has different effects on different dogs. Horn, trumpet, things like that. My son used to play the trumpet, and he when he was here in the house, and our dogs would howl at it. And the piano had the same effect on a pair of big brother Malamutes that I had taken in to rehabilitate at one point. And they howled with that and with sirens and all those things. But when I sat down with the classical guitar and played, they would join the rest of the dogs and gather around and basically relax and go to sleep. So different aspects of that. So the calming music does that for humans, and the parasympathetic aspect of that gives you, the chills, for instance, in certain music aspects, and those are psychological effects that don't have anything to do with adrenaline themselves, although there's a shot in there of epinephrine. But also parasympathetic, anticipatory for something good. And also it can be an excitatory. For instance, and I'll give you an example here. Tega is a female Siberian Husky who was at my house. I was working with her for 2 years, as a matter of fact, because she would get into fights because she had a piloerection at her withers, broad piloerection, and she would do this low growl that wasn't a threat. She had no social understanding of what she was doing, and she just wanted to greet and play. And so she gave all the wrong signals because it was an exciter for her, but for her it was the parasympathetic, not sympathetic aspects of fear or anything else. She was trying to show the other dogs that she meant no harm, and it was taken entirely wrong. It was the anticipatory part of that. I never saw her in a fight in that way. And the one that actually, the dog that actually stopped her from doing that and taught her was Nellie, who just stared through her. So that was an interesting encounter. So let's talk about the major elements that are part of the autonomic system, okay, nervous system. So first of all is fear. That's, everybody sees those things. So fear comes about with a perceived threat, loud sounds, thunder, firecrackers, gunshots, all those things. An immediate shot of sound, in other words, that's overwhelming to them. And I've explained to you guys in classes what that level of sound means to the dog. To them, that shock wave of literal air pressure on them that they sense and they feel, again through the guard furs and fur, as well as into the body itself. The way they interpret a loud sound is it's right on top of them. And so it doesn't make any sense when a loud sound goes off and there's nothing around them. There's nothing changed within the environment except for that loud sound. So that's one of the things that will cause piloerection as a fear element. So adrenaline shot right there. The other aspect of it is unexpected changes. And I'll give you another example of that. Sonny, 35, 40 years ago, our one of our dogs, sweet dog, but she was really into what we call object permanence. In other words, whatever was in the house the way it was, or in the outside yard, or wherever we went, if she was familiar with it and it wasn't in the exact same place, boy, piloerection, she'd bark at it, excited bark, and that was that fear aspect of that's not supposed to be moving. So she had this aspect of object non-permanence that disturbed her severely. She needed that to be always in that spot. And if you put a new item, for instance, of anything, it could be a plant, it could be a bag down on the floor in the living room, and it wasn't there the last time she left, and then she comes back to it and she would have the same reaction. A very smart dog, but just hit her in that way. So I'm going to go through these. I'm also going to talk to you about associated and accompaniments of different signals, I'll say body and et cetera, but we'll do that at the end of this grouping. So fear is the first one. 2 is surprise or unpredictability is another way I put it, but surprise is really that. And so that's really where that's more along the lines of what Sonny was doing with the non-permanence of objects, of not especially, of unanimate objects, in other words. So the third is aggression or dominance, which could be 2 entirely different things. Part is to warn and to prepare yourself, the body itself. And the dominance part is to assert. And that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. I hopefully will get to talk about that in more depth later. If a dog disagrees with another dog and it's a pro-social aspect that the dog is disagreeing with them, they may assert dominance in saying that's not what we do here. And so those hackles may go up slightly, and we'll talk about how that happens in what part of the body, because that's an entirely different subject matter. Then we get into fourth is insecurity. And these are just my categories. This is the way I explain it. There are others out there that you can probably look these things up and go into more depth in each one of these. It may take you a while, especially there's a lot of dispute about what these things mean. Frankly, from people who are possibly expert at some aspects, but still don't understand dogs very well. So insecurity happens when I'll say a new environment to them occurs. And that can be an entirely new environment. In other words, into a new location, a new place, a new area, even temporarily. That insecurity, and you might get a little bit of piloerection on that. So place, an out of place smell, you'll get piloerection on that. For instance, on a especially territorial area where they see their own territory as this, and another dog or animal comes in and urinates or leaves a smell of some sort, and you'll see them sniffing and getting a little antsy about things. It's an alert. Different sound, that's new in the environment. A different way to look at things. Let me put it this way: vision. So vision with dogs, if it's a different temperature than you've ever been in that location before, that's a difference because they see differently. Remember, they see into ultraviolet light range, and that ultraviolet light range is affected by temperature. So temperature, the time of day, all of those things. If you're habitual at going to a place in its extraterritorial jurisdiction, as I spoke about in the last one 2 weeks ago, and you've done it routinely at this time and this, stage, et cetera, and you go to a different time, that in itself changes sound, smell, vision, all of those things. So just be aware of those, okay? And this can cause mild piloerection in the dog. Also positive or negative air charges. So negative ions in the air from an oncoming storm. That's a new environment to them in their territory as well. Okay. It's one of the reasons that dogs can feel, then hear, and sense and smell that oncoming storm 4 times more distant than we can ever imagine. All right. And so when your dog is alerting or acting a bit differently, since you have weather apps these days, take a look at those things, know what the weather's going to be and where that is. They're not always extremely accurate, so it may be several hours earlier than normal. And if you want to learn who your dog is and how they respond to things, look at associations in those types of things. And don't project, but look at associations over a number of times and see if your dog is responding to that in that insecure way with mild piloerection. Okay. And then the difference of known environments, and we sort of talked to that. That's the insecurity still. So, but it can go into what's the difference of a known environment. I gave you one example of Sunny, who was our Cocker Spaniel. But so what's the differences? Something new in that known environment. Could be another human, could be a new baby, could be a number of things that you bring into that environment that all of a sudden their hackles go up. Doesn't mean they're aggressive, it's just something unknown. They're insecure. What's going on? Okay, it's their way of responding in that way. And because there's once again, we're talking about neurotransmitters, and of course, that's the thought in the brain that create those, and that goes throughout the entire body. It's not contained just within the brain itself. So adults versus children. Children are representative of chaos, noise, different smells, all sorts of stuff, but adults are potential threats. So that's one area to watch, whether the dog that you just got or you're working with or that you had for a long time responds to humans in that way, especially in that known environment. In other words, your home or someplace that you go all the time. And the newness, other animals, new bird, new cat, things like that. All of our dog, especially coming in, that can cause that piloerection. It doesn't necessarily mean aggression. You have to look at the other signs for that too. Okay. Okay, category 5 is excitement. Now, in play, you'll see piloerection, especially in dogs with high levels of what they consider play, like a Siberian Husky. They sound like they're killing each other. People think they're fighting when they're just having fun. So, but the piloerection happens because of overstimulation. So that's where I draw the line in play with any of the dogs, whether it's the rabbit that gets overwhelmed. I'm going to step in and cap the other's behaviors so that we don't cause that issue and cause a misunderstanding. So I will always step in to cap behavior when piloerection happens, either initially or during the play, because especially during play, the overstimulation can be excitement from the one, that's chasing the rabbit, or fear and a possible turn into aggression, basically protection, self-protection from the other dog. Okay. So that's one element of excitement. The other is anticipatory aspects, and there's studies that one of them I'm gonna quote from here in a few moments. From that standpoint, the anticipatory aspect of being left out of some activity, that they know what's coming, they know that's going to happen, and so that excitement causes piloerection many times in dogs. That is part of that again, the norepinephrine and those types. So it is sympathetic, it's not parasympathetic, but it's associated with a future aspect or an anticipatory aspect. The other is arousal, which is sexual potential. It is not the act itself, it's sexual potential. That happens in many animals, actually. And if you look at how, the spider dance or other, insects, birds, certainly, they fluff up, they do different things. And that's part of that erectional allowance or arousal. And so they're showing interest rather than fear or anything else. So it's used in a number of ways, especially in mammals. And some mammals have more aspects of it than others. Obviously, we have the goosebumps, the piloerection, the feel-good, parasympathetic aspects of music and all these other things. That's because we used to be a lot hairier than we are now. And our genetics are still in, back a few million years. So then there's, so those are the 5 kind of major areas. But then there's combinations or aspects that are associated with those that help the accompanying aspect of that, help you to understand what that mood, what that intent, what that mind is going into with dogs. So you've got the first aspect that I'll go cover is vocal. And so a dog with piloerection and vocal could be a yelp, a surprise, a yip, those sorts of things. Okay, so surprise aspect of the vocals, and you're familiar, hopefully, with most of those. I'm not going to go into depth. I don't have time on that. Maybe we can go into vocals themselves later, the various 20 plus categories of vocalizations at another time. Then you got the growls. So that can be a final warning, but it's also a preparation. The growl many times with a piloerective dog isn't even meant for others. It's simply its own internal intent preparing itself. It's much like it's much like a war charge where you're charging and you just yell and it just pumps you up. Okay. It does have an effect on the opposite party, but that's not why they're doing it. Okay. So the growl, in many cases, it can be almost unheard. It can be so low in volume. I'll give you an example of well, actually, let's go. There's another aspect of that, which is defensive barking. So the one piloerection of the dog goes, ar, 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 ar. In other words, keep away, keep away, keep away. I'm warning you, type thing. So anytime that you've got the barking or the growling or those types of indicators of either fear or confidence, frankly, you want to give that dog an out. If you're the one that's the object of that action, you want to give the dog an out. And that's an art form in itself of, do you stand your ground? Do you move forward? Do you back away? Do you act bored, nonchalant about things? Do you give a signal to the dog of, no, you move away, I'm not moving, or take your attention away? There's a number of ways that you give an out, but that comes from years of experience. Some of you guys know what I'm talking about. Most of you probably. And then obviously there's hundreds of postures that you can look at dogs and see, through these various aspects. So let's go through the next one, which is motion and movements. Also freezing. So freezing is a risk assessment point. If you look at it that way, they're freezing, they're watching what's going on to see what's that next step. Rachel, I'll get into solo and squealies in a minute. Okay. I finally saw a text thing, whatever you call it. Okay, so motion and movements are good. What's in the mind of that dog behind the piloerection? Okay. Lip licking is the self-calming aspect. So they are trying to calm themselves down, which is a good time to just let it go. And if another dog is involved in that and they don't take that, in other words, they're a dog that is not trying to be pro-social, they are antisocial in that moment, then you've got to step in and back that dog off, because the other dog's saying uncle, essentially. So, okay. Tail wagging, boy, I could get into that. Maybe that's another one of those subjects. Let's cover a few of those. Main three. Okay, so slow and low is basically a danger point. They're feeling threatened, but their decision has not been made. That's you usually see the slow and low, not with stalking necessarily, although it happens sometimes. But with a fixed position, maybe even a whale-eye position. So frozen, and I don't mean stiff, but frozen position, almost like a ready to pounce type thing. So slow and low, fast, short, and high. That's typically not just arousal, but fear aggression when they're doing this. That short, high, fast, pilot erection. Yeah, watch out, because you're going to. I used to say I'd much rather work with a fearful or just pure aggressive dog than a fear aggressive dog, because you've got to reach that dog first to show it that not everything is a threat to it. So the aggressive dog has the reasons. The fear aggressive dog just because they don't understand things and they fear things. So, and that goes into the lower brain then rather than the upper brain. The lower brain is the survival instinct, essentially. No decisions are made there other than I've got to survive. Okay. Actually, when is I think the questions for this, I doubt we'll have time. April 20th, I believe, is when we have Q&A sessions for the last 3 or 4 lives. I'm trying to go fast, but I'm trying to cover, okay? And then the tail tucked is scared or vulnerable. They feel very vulnerable. You'll still see piloerection on them, mostly just in the withers area, broad withers. So, so that's all within tail wagging. Another combination is the ears are erect. And if the ears are erect, they're confident. They have extreme alertness, and especially if they're focused in the predatory boom forward aspect. That means all of their attention is on that object, that thing, you, whatever it is. So those ears are forward, the eyes are forward, the nose are forward. All their senses are to that thing. So they're confident about it. Even if they're in fear, they're confident about what they need to do. I'll put it that way. So entirely alert. Ears pinned back. There's 2 categories of that I've seen, and I don't see that explained out there. That's why I wanted to get into some of these things. So ears pinned back can be fearful if it's laying down real close. It can be defensive, but it can also be preparation for the fight because they know their ear can be latched onto and used against them. It's not a fear of them losing their ear. It's getting it out of the way of combat, essentially. Okay. It's like me blocking my groin if I go into a fight. I'm going to close up my stance so that I can't get kicked in the groin. Okay. Just to be graphic. Okay. 8 in that category are the eyes. So you got wide eyes. That's high alert and expectation. It's usually within the action time or that decision's been made. You have soft eyes, which are calming aspect. The erection may be there because of uncertainty, fear, doubt, all of those things. But the soft eyes, they don't have anything behind it other than to survive. They want the out, and you're looking for that out anyway. And again, not a dog or another animal that's pressing that against a dog like that. You must step in because that other dog's got to get its mind broken from attacking. Okay. Then you have whale eye as well. There's all sorts of aspects with the eyes. Those are the 3 main categories. So wide, soft, and the whale eye. Whale eye is that anticipatory. I'm warning you and I'm ready to go, basically. So then 9, just defensive postures, we'll say. So the defensive aspect of we're leaning away, the turning around, moving away. And if a dog's got piloerection and it's moving away and turning back to look to make sure there's no one following. It's trying to give you the out. It's trying to give itself the out and you as well. Let that happen. Let them get away. Don't pursue that. And same thing with another dog that starts to try to pursue that. You block that action however you can. And then 10 in that category is sniffing scent. As an alert or trigger, you'll see that. And that's what I was talking about a little earlier was dog smells a new scent in its territory that has, we'll say, hormonal triggers of potential threat or trespass or whatever you want to call it within their territory or their known area. And you'll see them really sniff, and those hackles will come up. Two aspects to that. One is sexual arousal, that anticipatory aspect. And again, you've got to read the dog and all the other aspects of it. Why is it doing that? Is it aroused for defensive aspects of defending our territory, or is it aroused? And it could be, as I've gotten into the habit of saying, it's 1,000 layers of things. There's no one answer for anything, honestly, guys. And if you want the simple answers, don't come to me. Okay. Just don't, just quit. Okay. Because there are no such things as simple answers. You have to learn the complex to make it simple. So, so the sexual anticipation, anticipatory, excitatory, all of those things versus, and they could be linked together between that defensive territorial aspect, could be linked together. So it may have been, for instance, wolves into another territory. They foray into another territory looking for a mate, or they could be foraying to see, are these guys still here? How many are there? What's their health? Can we attack them and take over their territory too if we need more resources or we find more better? Okay, so there's layer upon layer of aspects. But I'm giving you all of these, I'm trying to give you these elements, pick one from column A, column B, column C, etc. But also know what's behind it. Also, have any of you guys ever had your dogs have piloerections during sleep? Have you ever noticed them? Let me put it that way. They do. And it's basically neural stimulations. And it may be mild, it may be, it may actually, and it may be through something that they enjoy, pleasurable, anticipatory, or it may be they're having a dream about something bad that happened. So it could be a good or a bad aspect. So best not to wake them up during that time because they may redirect on you. If they're startled and it's, a very negative connotation that they're having at that time. Over some stuff. Okay. So in the how it's used, I'll break on that point, and then we're going to go to types and areas later. We'll come back to that. So how is it used? The volitional, in other words, the voluntary control of piloerection has been previously reported. I'm reading my own notes here, sorry. Has been reported in a small subset of individuals. This was a study of humans, but it's true for dogs as well. This is interesting. Although this ability may be useful to study the mechanism underlying piloerection, there is little existing research on this ability. So voluntary, in other words, that they studied people to see if they could create their own piloerection without emotional stimulations. So let me go down here where the voluntarily generated piloerection, what they call VGT, was basically to study neuroscience. And in the first study, they were to confirm the characteristics of VGP reported in previous studies and identify individuals with the VGP capability. In the second part, 18 VGP holders participated in piloerection measurement experiment and based upon objective data and image-based analysis. So largely confirmed the characteristics of VGP reported in the previous studies, and study 2 demonstrated that at a group level and provided information about temporal characteristics of this ability, which supports the utility of VGP in their neuroscientific research. For some participants, VGP appeared to be emotionally promoted, which suggests that VGP has some relationship, that's the voluntary aspect, some relationship with emotional nature of involuntary piloerection. Okay, so the reason I stopped at the sleep part is this is also involved in the sleep part. So that brain is going through an emotional phase at that. Although the studies do not tightly control the environment in which VGP was elicited, the findings nonetheless demonstrate the possible contribution of VGP to elucidating the mechanism of involuntary emotional piloerection. Piloerection in humans is an autonomic response observed during a variety of strong emotional experiences, including fear and anger, aesthetic pleasure, awe, and surprise. Awe is another one. Whether dogs have awe or not, I don't know. That would be a difficult way to study that and define how we use that word of awe. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Animals typically deploy their morphology during conflict to enhance competitors' assessments of their fighting ability. In other words, barred fangs, piloerection, dewlap, inflation, all of these other things that it's poof, make themselves bigger. It also has a physical attribute to it that if you have, for instance, around this vital area, the neck and the withers, if you fluff up, especially long guard furs, and if you look at wolves and the others of the northern breed Spitz dogs, they have very long guard fur. So when you put that up, it has not just I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I'm more dangerous aspects as a signal, but it can also cause a miss in a bite, for instance, where you're biting into fur and you think you're biting into solid object. So in a lot of ways, it's like camouflage in certain areas. It's one of the reasons that the fur is longer here in these areas to protect the neck, which is the most exposed part of the vertebrae, obviously. Okay. So piloerection has many functions to it for survival, not just signaling and thermal regulation, but actual during combat has effects, as well as, you know, if you have layers of fur that if you don't have the right type of teeth to get down into that, or you've got a lot of fur that dampens the bite, you know, the penetration of the bite, that's an advantage as well. So those animals that survive have much thicker and longer fur for those purposes. Bears do it too, at the same thing, guys. Okay. So in dogs, survival to a dog is all of these aspects. It can show intent. It protects itself. It causes, because of the adrenaline aspect, causes that readiness to happen, whether it's in fear or aggression or frankly survival need of any way. Other dogs with them, reading that dog. So in other words, dogs are wolves in a pack, and read that dog, and they are affected, associative learning. They are affected by that dog to, if they see this one in piloerection and certain signals, they immediately go into that to see what that animal is concerned about or seeing as a potential target. Okay. What does it mean to humans in the household versus humans out there? And that's what you've got to study and look at. What about other dogs against them? How do they read those things? And again, it's all the other aspects. It's the associated signals with that tell that other dog about how that dog feels and whether or not that needs to get corrected or eliminated or left alone. Again, it goes back to territorial aspects. You will watch, you can see dogs that are out of their territory. They may still act confidently, but they'll act in a defensive, confident mode unless they're just off, out of their territories and out of their known areas. In their own territory, they behave very differently, especially confident dogs. I'm talking about confident dogs in both cases. Then they are protecting their territory and the things within it. And that's a different level of confidence. And it's also a different level of, they're no longer defensive and defending themselves or others. They're defending everything, their survival. That's the difference, and you can see those differences within those. So shelter is obviously the strongest association with survival for territory. Goes back to the 2 week ago talk. On territorial aspects and understanding that indoor environments replicate denning. And when you look at dogs in the wild, for instance, what we would call feral dogs that have, for instance, pups, they'll dig into the ground if they have no other place to make a den. So they have to have some sort of aspect to that. And that's that inner shelter, essentially. So that's a lot stronger survival instinct for them. So that's why territorially, when you invite others into your house or another dog or animal or anything comes into that house, you may get piloerection instantly. Okay. Space itself, the distance from, that causes a number of factors to a dog, and you'll get piloerection in different. Predatory as a predator, but it can also be a warning. So movement of the others, not themselves necessarily. And then there's the human factor of responses, emotion versus no emotion, and how that factors into the level and understanding of that dog to be able to either lessen its need for those signals and that adrenaline shot, or heighten it, act upon it. So it's the human that influences if they're around. That's what I need you guys to understand. As a matter of fact, well, I'm kind of, next month's is about personal behavior, yours. So that's going to be an interesting one if I can cram that into an hour and a half. Might be 2 hours on that one, Angela. I don't know. Okay, so we talked about sleep and we stopped there. So types and areas, let's look at that. So what does it mean? Okay. Actually, let's do this. Let's go into types and areas. So types of piloerection. Okay, you've got different areas and types of piloerection. I'm going to try to explain some of my observations and discussions I've had with others about what these things could mean, and there's variations within them, obviously, that all these other factors factor in. First one is the thin line on the shoulder, just that kind of 1 inch thick line on the withers and shoulders to where it fluffs up in that area. And there could be just that, or that could go all the way down the back to the base of the tail. It could even go all the way down to the tip of the tail. The tail involved those nerves that go along the top. If you look at it from the practical aspect, what does that do? It makes the dog look bigger, taller, et cetera, right? Without involving the rest of the body. So it's not overstimulating. It's basically showing it in a high confidence. Okay. That dog is in high confidence generally. And so what happens is it's giving indication and it's showing all the way to the tail, which makes it look bigger, taller, et cetera, without wasting more energy, in other words. So it's in a ready position, and it can be why would a dog have high confidence? Well, it may be genetic, it may be the breed of the dog, it can be practiced behaviors that have gotten itself a good outcome. So it can be genetic memory, it can be, in other words, the breed itself, or how that particular dog is genetically put together, or it could be from learned behaviors. Second type of areas is a broad patch at the withers. So you will see that go all the way down into the scapula across the back, but it's only about a third of the area of the entire back. So it stays in the thoracic area and doesn't even go to the floating ribs. Generally could, but it does not go into the lumbar area. So certainly the frontal half of the back. And that's usually indication somewhere of surprise, I'll say fear or uncertainty, low confidence about itself. So that's usually that area that's that uncertainty, that first alert, if you will. And it's, broader area across the shoulders and scapula. So uncertainty in that general area of some sort, okay, as a general category. So a medium to broad patch at the withers, this is the third level, and plus a medium patch at the pelvic top. That's a heightened state of arousal through there. Okay, so wide plus wide or medium at the back. And those two elements there, very high state of arousal. You can call it a ready state, maybe even an anticipatory state. And the next step determines the outcome, whether that's a good or a bad outcome. So the next step. So if a dog does that, and you see that, try to give that dog an out, or you take the out. Okay. Or that dog, if it's against other dogs, then break that mindset to take those other dogs away. Okay. Boy, there's just so much. Usually that state is considered ambivalent or uncertain. I just say it's a ready state. It's what's next? What's the next step? Okay. Okay, 4 within the types and areas, patch at the withers and the tip of the tail. So just the withers and the tip of the tail, nothing at the pelvic or even in the center of the back. I've seen those. That's a dog that's uncertain. I'll put it that way. And therefore some of its behavior is less predictable. The reason it's less predictable for itself, for others, and especially for humans is because they don't know how to read it. So it's kind of in conflict with itself, essentially, is what it's saying. And you don't know what that outcome is going to be generally in that state. So 5 in area is top of the head. Top of the head and the withers down the neck and to the withers is a very concerned dog. I don't ever hear or see anything about people talking about the top of the head with piloerection. And yet I've seen it quite often with severe dogs that they're concerned about situations. I will tell you that feral, fearful dogs rarely, when they're around humans, when they're feral dogs and they haven't been around humans, rarely show with any of the piloerection in that way. You have to push them very far for them to do that. That means you've gone way too far with that. You become a threat in their mind because they have no faith or trust in humans whatsoever. So when you're working with fearful feral animals, it's the reason I've never been bit by a fearful or feral animal or ever a wolf even. So it's because I don't push them to that point. You got to be very clear with your intent, which is I am not a threat. I don't see you as a threat. That's the first overriding value that you should have always. Okay? So number 6 is the withers to the tip of the tail. In other words, the entire body is involved in that. And it could or could not involve the top of the head. I don't see it at the top of the head much because they're already getting their ears in position for action. That decision's been made. You are at the point of no return, essentially. So the entire body is flushed, boom, they're ready to go. Okay. And then the tail only is this puff up, kind of like a cat, okay? Like they puff up and that tail goes entirely. That's, believe it or not, that's showing confidence. That dog is in confidence. Now, how it shows that and all those other associated elements is why is it confident? What is it showing you? And that's where the dominance aspect, what we call dominance, is basically saying, hey, look at me. I disagree with this. So it's confident about the situation. If they're handling it properly and correctly without overdoing it, in other words, if it's a generally pro-social animal, not a social or antisocial animal, they'll handle it better than we will. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Oh gosh. We're running out of time. Okay. So I'm gonna try to wrap this up so I can get to this other psychophysiotherapy aspect. So I will tell you that long-term or multiple stress piloerection causes excessive shedding and fur loss. So a dog in a stressful situation or how it feels about the situation that it's in. You may not think it's stressful for you and you may be trying to help this dog, but it sees it as nothing but stressful because it doesn't understand, doesn't trust the situation. So if you're getting hair loss, fur loss that's unusual for that particular breed or that time of year or whatever else, then if that dog is in stress, it either has had long-term piloerection and then the hair follicle, basically the hair just falls out, or it's having multiple times and that's what it is. Okay? It literally cuts off blood supply. So in a normal state, non-piloerective state, hair follicles stay at about 30 to 60-degree angle from the skin, so somewhere between here and here naturally. And when, and they'll typically do this. So it depends on the undercoat, for instance. If you've got a thick undercoat like a Malamute or an Akita or one of those types, then those will fall this way. If you get piloerective, then you're going to flip that thing up. It's still going to have a little bit of, but you can see the differences in those. Okay. So, and then let's talk about dog breeds, the differences of fur. Ridgebacks get misunderstood by other dogs. They think they're in a piloerective state always. And that can be misinterpreted by other breeds and not have a good outcome. And Ridgebacks are one of those dogs that they'll just take it to you anyway. That's how we bred them. That's how we created them. So, they're not afraid of much of anything. At least the original ones, they go after lions and stuff. So that's what they are. Then you've got the groupings of the curly hair, Puli, the poodles, the southern Caucasian shepherds, those type, that they do have piloerection. It's just tough for you to see it generally because of that wad of curly fur. But if you look closely, you can see that stiffness that comes up slightly. Okay, it does change the angle on that. A lot of the times in some of those, even with the black coated, but with the white coated, the light coated dogs, you can see shadow changes. In other words, the density because of the piloerection. Even with the black ones, it kind of changes the, I'll say, not necessarily, how can I say this, sheen, if you will, to it. So you see a little different in that. You have to look closely though, and other dogs, once again, they may or may not recognize that. Anatolians and some of those types of dogs that have a huge I'll say shoulder withers area. So in other words, their body is like this, and then they've got this massive hump, almost like a Brahma bull. Okay, that type of, because of the processes and where their fur, especially fur thickness, because of the length of that fur in that tactical region, just laying flat, they can be misunderstood by other breeds because it looks like they're piloerective in their shape. So their shape is confusing in some of those types. Huskies and Malamutes, they have their own issues because they have a slightly more, how can I say this, complex and different way of communicating language, if you will, than a lot of other dogs. Then you got the Akitas and the Shibas types that can be expressive, but generally aren't. So you have non-expressive dogs that have other issues, so that when there is any piloerection, the dogs can't read them because they may be just, resting bitch face. And then you've got short-haired dogs that, very short-haired, that may not even be red at all, other than coloration, again, shade, shadow, etc. And then you've got hairless dogs like the Peruvian hairless or the show-wing squeakies, that piloerective aspect doesn't work. So you're looking at all the other aspects of that animal. Now the Cholos, they do have a crest. There's the crested Chinese, all those, and they will become erected. Generally, where other dogs and humans aren't really looking. So I've covered the basics here. If I have a few moments, which I apparently do. Oh, no, I haven't covered the basics. Sorry. Still have. We gotta go back to this other one. Okay. Well, let me take this time and go. All right, I already covered that. There's one area that I just wanted to look at. So piloerection in humans, the goose pump, is tightly linked to the study of chills or thrills. Piloerection actually denotes the visible erection of body hair. The phenomenon of chills or thrills usually relates to a subjective experience. 52% of cases subjective chills response featured objective piloerection, and concludes that piloerection marks the occurrence of a chill, but a chill may also occur without piloerection. So the feeling doesn't necessarily have to occur with piloerection. That's why you're looking at a number of other aspects. So, so presumably both non-emotional and emotional piloerection rely on the same neurological and molecular mechanisms. That's important for you to understand. In this first section, most of those mechanisms will be identified briefly so that they can be then applied to understanding of emotional piloerection. So in that, let me see. Yeah, I talked about birds and their feather muscles, which are different than the APM in mammals. Sympathetic nervous system, specifically postganglionic class C nerve fibers, provide both adrenergic and cholinergic innervation of dermal organs, including the APM. Okay, yeah, you don't want to know that. Sorry, I'm going into my nightly type of studies here. But norepinephrine is the neurotransmitter that is received by the receptor and begins the intracellular signaling process that ultimately results in smooth muscle contraction. Okay, so smooth muscle is the relaxed muscle, and the contraction, the neuroepinephrine is what is used as an agonist to cause piloerection. So adrenal aspects, thermal regulation. Some of these thermal receptors are dedicated for either hot or cold temperatures. So temperature and pain both cause piloerections as well. So if your dog doesn't have any other aspects that you can figure out about why it has a piloerection, it may be in pain. That's another area that you need to be very aware of and understand and study. APM is controlled by the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. In other words, it's in sympathy with your emotions, your pain, or whatever else. Okay, and yeah, humans, I'm not worried about that. It's clear that piloerection occurs in response to many types of external events. These events might be purely psychological or physiological in nature, such as temperature change, or they might have a psychological component, such as a positive or negative emotional experience. Okay, I'm not going to worry about parasympathetic. All and non-emotional physiological mechanisms are the same. No, I'm not going to go into parasympathetic. Emotions in non-human animals, I've gone all over that. They go into pygmy marmosets and TT monkeys and other monogamous and non-monogamous, which is interesting because that talks about the aspect of, for instance, dogs that are held, border collie that's held out from doing its job while you're working with sheep, and it will get piloerective because it's anticipating that action. So, okay. So what does this all mean? So how do we use this to our benefit? So you've got trained versus learned, okay? And that's in the dog itself. You can teach a dog by your behaviors, whether that piloerection is merited or not. Most of the time, we don't want that, okay? And that's how these animals can live with us. These predators can live with us. But you do want to be very sensitive to what they're telling you in these various situations. So we can learn it that way. Using genetic memory, then that also cues you into when something actually is very important. Okay. And that's the difference between Fluffy going to the back corner and barking at something all day long, and you go and stop that Fluffy, or Fluffy goes, "Hey," and you see the piloerection. There's something different about that. You should check that out. You should go check that out anyway, but and stop all the corner barking. So you can use it as a defined alert. Certainly when, when I'm out on my property out in Blue Ridge and other people are walking along, or an unusual truck, or, somebody comes down the trail with a dog and I'm not looking at it, but Bosch or Toffee or any of my other dogs are there, I can see the difference in their body shape, their body behavior, their focus with the eyes, the ears go forward, and the piloerective aspect, especially on their withers, shoulder area, goes up. And I know immediately, so I can use that and then either reinforce them or tell them, calm, I've got this. Okay. And it's a defined threat from their aspect. And depending on how you use things, if you have, for instance, protection dog, an actual protection dog, that better be under control, by the way, threat perceptions and their level of understanding of threat perceptions, and that's to be taught, again, trained versus learned. And then scent areas and densities as well, okay? So, my dogs tell me when another dog's been on our property. Very easy. So, okay, I think I'm going to stop there because obviously everything's related. And, we've gone through a number of aspects of piloerection, some of the areas of what I've observed, some, I won't say disputed, but some differences in those regions and zones of piloerection within the body. And what I've observed over the years, it can do this, it can do that, depending on a lot of other factors, or it's generally this. So I hope this has helped in some way. Angela, I'm trying, I'm keeping it all within an hour and a half. You beat me up enough. So you can see how deep this could go, guys. But I do want to introduce you to this, and I spend at least some good information for all of you in this. And I'm looking for. I'm not feeling well. I'll be completely transparent here. My wife has a bad infection, sinus infection. She's on medications, and I think I've got a little bit of it myself, not badly, so I'm not feeling good. My throat is kind of bad, so I was just trying to make sense of all of this today. How could I codify this and share some information with you? So I hope it's come across well. Anyway,
This was great. And I've got several questions that I'll put on the Q&A. So,
okay.
yep.
Okay. Outstanding.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate you, honestly, doing this for you guys. So have a good night, and we will talk to you later.
Thank you, Nelson.
Bye.
Bye-bye.